Hi, Leo Sun and Rising. Welcome to a video looking at the transits that are occurring in March 2023, where Saturn is going into Pisces and Pluto is going into Aquarius. So they're kind of like, they're adjacent signs and they're just moving to the next sign over. And I'm also going to talk about how they have affected the current house that they have been transiting, because in some cases, like for instance with Saturn, it's going to be in that house as I record this for almost 2 months. And with Pluto, it's going to go briefly into Aquarius, and then it's going to retrograde into Capricorn, back into Capricorn, and stay there for, I think, even the rest of 2023, going into 2024. So you're going to still have that. I I can't remember like when it goes back into Aquarius, but yeah. So we're not done with some of this energy, although with the Saturn and the Pisces situation, that is, once it goes into Pisces, it will stay there. The other reason that I want to say that this may be relevant where these planets are currently transiting is that, you know, this is for 0 degrees of Aquarius, the Pluto transit. So that's as far as it's going in 2023. And so if you have um, your eighth house cusp, and maybe it is 10 degrees of Pisces, then it won't go there even in 2023, because I think Saturn only goes up to 7 degrees of Pisces. And then it retrogrades, it loses degrees, and by the time it comes back up, I think at the end of 2023, it only gets up to like 1 degree of Pisces or something like that. So the personal chart is super duper important in terms of exact timing, but it is going to go into these houses eventually. Okay, so I hope that that's not too confusing. So anyway, I'll start with Saturn. Saturn has been transiting um, Aquarius for the last, almost 3 years. And it's important to note too, with this March 2023 situation, is that this is phenomenal that we have two outer planets that are going into new signs in the same month, because this transit of Pluto into Aquarius will be altogether 20 years. Pluto is a generational planet. Saturn is a few years, so it is hardly as long lasting as Pluto, but still, Saturn hasn't gone into Pisces in almost 30 years, so that is definitely significant. So Saturn has been in Aquarius for the last few years, and this is your seventh house of committed partnership. So this can have so many different possibilities, some of them challenging and some of them awesome. And this is an important point to make, Leo. None of these transits is, oh my God, bad or guaranteed to be good or even guaranteed to affect you. To be honest, I mean, to be brutally honest, because I look at my own chart. Sometimes I can see the influences, sometimes I can't. Does that mean I should cancel astrology altogether, or maybe just the predictive part of it? No, but I feel like people, they get too invested in something that to me should be taken as more of like looking at trends and keeping it kind of um, more casual, rather than getting obsessed with, oh my God, this is going to happen, and anticipating the worst, and creating um, exactly what you don't want because you're so afraid of it. No, don't do that to yourself. So what's been going on is that Saturn in the seventh house, if you have been in a marriage or the equivalent type of committed partnership, or maybe even if you're not living under the same roof, but you have a monogamous relationship, you may have undergone some trials if the relationship has been rocky. And this could include tests to monogamy. You know, one person isn't sure that they want to stay with that other person, or they want to be faithful to that person, or maybe they weren't faithful. And it's, I don't know if I would say that you would be the one tempted. If I had to choose, I would say that the other party was tempted, and maybe that put a strain on your relationship. What they say is that if somebody goes into a Saturn in the seventh transit and they are in a relationship, it can either strengthen the relationship or it can weaken and even just completely eliminate the relationship, because the people are just too they're not on the same page, or there's something that is not right within that partnership. And Saturn doesn't like excess. So if there's an excess, maybe it's an excess in emotion, like emotional drama or something like that. Saturn doesn't want there to be that kind of undisciplined behavior. And I know that doesn't sound very romantic, but relationships at that point, when they're in the committed stage, they have to function on a day-to-day level. It's not all about hearts and flowers and everything like that. So if you're in a relationship where you're always arguing with your partner, you that alone can show that you're not compatible. Maybe you just have different temperaments, or you're not on the same page with life in general. I mean, I don't think you have to be a carbon copy of another person, but I do feel like when you have very uh, different ways of looking at life, this can create more friction than it can that's, supposed attraction of opposites. So, with Leo, sometimes this occurs because you were in lust and you weren't in love. I say this over and over again, that I think that Leo is one of those signs that they tend to have problems in relationships because, and this is like, I think this is a recurring theme, that they are putting their physical desires ahead of other important elements in the relationship. And then for some reason, it seems that relationships based on the physical tend to be contentious relationships. And maybe it's because the two people are using each other and they're really not in love, and it's kind of a degraded experience, even if they can't see it at the time. I don't know. But you may discover the hard way about what commitment is really about. And it might make you, it might change you in some way. But speaking of change, I'll get to that when Pluto goes into this area. So, another thing this could do is it could cause you to commit, because Saturn is about responsibility and about being mature. And Leo is a sign that I think of all the fire signs has the greatest ability to commit, because you're a fixed sign. And I feel like you welcome constancy and predictability in your life, and it doesn't bother you. You know, Sag, I'm a Sag, and Aries are very, freedom loving, to the extent that relationships may be seen as a liability if the person feels like they're going to be, it's going to be some kind of prison sentence. And that's not what a fire sign wants. But at least Leo has this desire for their life to be, kind of orderly, where they have, in other words, some people, they just want a um, steady partner. They want life to be steady, and that's why I said predictable. But it's, predictable sounds kind of bad in the sense that it's like it sounds dull or something like that. But no, I mean, just that there's a stability there when it comes to relationships. So, yeah, so that could be a good thing. So, you might finally say, okay, let's do this. And you take responsibility. Now, for some of you, this is going to be your first Saturn return. If you're around the age of 30, you'll have to look at your particular chart to see if you have Saturn in Pisces in your natal chart, because that will clue you into that. And the reason I say this is that Saturn is, when you have your first Saturn return, it's not uncommon, or I would think so, especially nowadays, for that to be the time when people decide to get married or settle down in general, have children in their late 20s. Back in the day, people got married much younger on average, maybe sometimes 20 or right after college. And now it seems like there's a delay. And so this can be something that influences you to make that move now, because you feel like you're finally a grown up. People that are in their late 50s, and I'm in that category, are going to have their second Saturn return. So it's going to be more of a review of sorts. Like, what were the choices that you made? Are you okay with them? Are you happy with where you're at? And there's even a third Saturn return. It's like every 30 years. So there can be people who are in their 90s or in their late 80s, I guess, who could be experiencing a third Saturn return. I never have heard of anyone. They usually don't talk about this in astrology that I have read, but they could certainly be out there. People do live, into their late 80s and in their 90s, and I just don't know if I have any of those kinds of viewers or subscribers. I haven't. I look at my analytics from time to time, but anyway, if you're out there, congratulations. So the point is that that could be happening as well, and that could be also influencing your life and really sobering you up, especially that first Saturn return, because you're coming from childhood and this extended adolescence, which I really think the 20s can be a lot of times in certain ways, and rightfully so. Where, especially, it's interesting too, because I've noticed a trend where, children were very scheduled in their childhood and teenage years. And then they, I was reading about how they go off to college and they go crazy because they finally have unstructured time and they don't know what to do with themselves because they just never had that training to teach themselves how to self-regulate. So some of them just go off the deep end, maybe partying all the time or whatever. And that can be a very confusing time, the 20s, for certain young people. And that could be, and also for different reasons, but that's okay in the sense that if somebody is really trying to find themselves and they don't have these outer responsibilities and they're able to get by, as long as they're not being totally self-destructive, finding out what kind of life really fits for you is a great thing. And now that you're nearing the age of 30, you could be getting to that point where you kind of have figured some of it out at least. So when it goes into your 8th house, this is the area where not the unconscious, but the subconscious mind is really what this house is all about. The eighth house is Scorpio's domain, and I'll just get the money aspect of it out of the way. This is the house of shared resources. The second house is the house of the money that you earn, or I would say also attract to you. And this is money that the eighth house can be money that is yours, that you participate in with other people, and it can also be I feel like it can be things connected to like inheritances, and even like you may find during this transit that you have to take the reins of responsibility, fiscal responsibility for someone like a parent, for instance. Let's say you have a parent who's incapacitated and they look to you to handle their money. Maybe you are going to be the executor of a will, or you're just going to, I don't know the other, it frustrates me. I don't know that term when you're taking care of like a parent's finances in general, but it isn't the will necessarily. But you know what I mean, when you're like kind of in charge of all of that. But of course, this would be for those Leos who are very astute in that area. I'm talking about, when I say Leos, the sun sign Leos, because Leo rising, it could be your sun might be, some other sign, and it's not necessarily affecting you in a certain way. Maybe your sun is in Capricorn and you're already very good with money, or Taurus or something like that. But what so that could be some responsibility that is placed on you for somebody else's money. You may have to pay off a debt during this time that, so you're taking responsibility for the money that you owe to somebody else, because that's the eighth house as well as others' resources, including taxes, insurance, and whatnot. And there's also the part of this that has to do with your psychological issues, because this is the shadow, the house of the shadow, and Saturn isn't playing. Saturn is like, if you've got these issues, you've got to take care of it. And this is one of the transits where you might go into psychotherapy, traditional psychotherapy, which I now see as shadow work, a form of shadow work. But the other things are of a metaphysical or a witchy. There's a witchy aspect to the eighth house, metaphysical, occult, but shamanic. And when I say shamanic, it could be literally that you're either studying shamanic healing or you're getting it for yourself. But or maybe you've already studied and now you're a practitioner, because you've had Pluto in the sixth house, and that can be the influence of being a healer. So maybe you've already gotten your training, and Pluto is one of the rulers of the eighth house. So when it goes to that sixth house of work, it could be, obtaining a job as a healer. But that involves training first, obviously. So I'm going to get to the Pluto in a second, but I just wanted to kind of tie those two transits together. So in the eighth house, this can be about a sense of getting serious about something that has to do with your shadow, or you could say the subconscious mind, which kind of like may file away certain unpleasant things, traumas. The eighth house can be trauma. And maybe this is the time you finally deal with the trauma that you've had. If you have natal planets in the eighth house, this can give you more information about possible trauma that you have experienced. And then there's other things that could do that as well. And it's like it's taking a sober look at this. And as I understand it, speaking of sobriety, um, the eighth house is one of the houses of addiction. I would say through obsession, because Scorpio is a very obsessive sign, and Pluto, I would say, and I would even go as far as saying it could that addiction can be OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. Not having any training in mental health, I still, have my own mind and I can imagine things. And that's what it seems like to me, where somebody does something, even if they know it is destroying their body, their mind, and their soul, they they just make a beeline towards it. Well, that's an obsession and compulsion. And something that's compulsive, a person may feel like they can't resist it, no matter how hard they try. So Saturn can be like, yes, you can resist it. So Saturn can help you to kind of get over some of those um, addictions or obsessions that continue to derail you and are more likely to create those shadow elements. Because when you think about it, if somebody is um, getting high or getting drunk or whatever and avoiding, like, they're avoiding dealing with certain unpleasant emotions, those are what the shadow represent. And over time, that can build and build. And so Saturn can be like, hey, you've got to deal with this problem. And you know, we have to look at addiction beyond substance abuse. I say this also about the 12th house, which is really the premier house of addiction. But I think the 8th house can also be like that. And you can find that since this is the house of transformation, you really improve quite a bit during the next 3 years in that regard. But you may take on a course of studies that is connected to the occult in some way. Maybe you want to study astrology even for a living because Saturn can be your career. Um, Tarot and other metaphysical or esoteric subjects, and Saturn is very serious about these things. Now let's look at Pluto. So this is so Plutonian, what I've just been talking about. But Pluto has been your 6th house of health and service to others, and you may have found that you have become very healed in some way, even physically. I have noted that the 6th house can even be diet, in addition to health in general. And Pluto going into 6th house for some people can indicate eating disorders. And typically, we think of like anorexia or bulimia or something like that. And certainly anything where the person is trying to control their diet, because Pluto can be control. Yes, I guess we could say those kinds of eating disorders. But another one that may not be as widely known is called orthorexia, where a person is obsessed with eating cleanly. Pluto is about detox and toxins themselves, but also purging of toxins. And so when somebody gets obsessed with their health, and so Pluto can just be obsession with health in general. When they do that, they can start to eliminate foods. Be like, I saw the example where the person refused to drink water because it wasn't filtered water, and they were afraid of contamination from tap water and whatnot. And, I want to say that I do believe that, if you have access to filters, by all means, do that. I'm not saying tap water is just hunky dory, but I'm just saying that when people are doing something from a fear based perspective, then obviously they're not coming at something in a very balanced way. So they're going to be very obsessive about it, and that could have a detrimental effect on their health. And in a way, sometimes it may resemble anorexia, where the person starts eliminating foods, one food after the other, and they become more and more gaunt, uh, undernourished, or malnourished because they decide, they read something that says this is a bad food, this is a bad food, and then they just keep, going down. And I'm not even just talking about actual junk food, processed food. I'm talking about certain foods that they think have, you know, chemicals like, um, anti-nutrients or something like that. And these are like plant-based foods too. So it's one of those things that if you're into nutrition, you know what I'm talking about. But that's just one possibility that I thought was kind of an interesting thing. Also, there could be workplace drama underneath the surface. Pluto's always like that psychological shadow element, and power plays at work. You might be the culprit though, because first of all, you're a Leo and you tend to want to be a leader, and you might be a good one if you're balanced. But Pluto here can give that obsession for power in the workplace, and that can put other people off and make them a little bit wary. Um, but yeah, just gravitating towards the type of work that involves being a healer, involves transforming other people. So then on March 23rd, Pluto goes into Aquarius. Again, it's only going to 0 degrees in something minutes. So for most of you, this may not actually be in 2023, but it's good to know anyway. Um, and This is going to be your seventh house of committed partnership. So you've just had Saturn through that house, and now you're going to have Pluto through that house. And so suffice it to say, your relationship, if you have one currently, could be quite intense, where you're kind of doing shadow work for each other. And some of this may be because, you're finally, pulling off the masks and really being, really like showing up as you are, but it could be a bit harrowing in the sense that it could be something that is quite emotionally fraught with a lot of heavy emotions. And like I said, when Saturn rolled through that seventh, and as I am recording this in January of 2023, Saturn is still in Aquarius. So you might be dealing with the aftermath of this situation. If you had infidelity in your relationship, that brings up all kinds of emotions. And for a Leo person, you may, be triggered if your partner cheated on you. All the things that made you feel confident about yourself may go out the window, and you question yourself. Am I desirable? Am I lovable? Am I worthy? And usually, Leo people carry themselves in a way that everybody would assume the answer to that is yes, but it's not that simple, because sometimes it can be extremely challenging for that person to face the music as it pertains to how they perceive of themselves and things like that. And I've been hearing about this in general, about the the um, the energy on the planet, is that a lot of these old wounds can reemerge. And so even beyond the transit of, Pluto and Aquarius in your seventh house, this can be something that all of us are revisiting. And the reason is because our spiritual evolution is a spiral and not a circle. A circle just recycles. You just think of the word recycle, circle, cycle. And a spiral, there's always an ascension, but there's still, it goes back down. So we always can have these either moments of doubt or even slipping up and doing something that we thought we had completely put behind us, but we still are ascending. It's not like we're just going in circles. So, or just completely backsliding. So anyway, if you are working in as a healer, the seventh house can be your clients. So Pluto in the seventh could be healing your clients, and really having an intense one-on-one relationship with them. But let's speak about those people who might be single now, those Leos, and during the next 20 years, you may meet a person, and I'm going to actually warn you, because there could be a positive side to this, but talking about the potential danger where you meet someone who becomes a very controlling person in your life. Now, they say that Pluto, has this transformative element. So this person could actually transform your ideas of commitment, but the way that they teach this lesson could be quite harsh. So you don't need to go through that if you can possibly avoid it. Any relationship that you get involved with from now until, I would just say this is good practice, a good practice for the rest of your life, to be honest with you. But is that you really get to know somebody as an individual, where you're not getting caught up in the physical side, and you really can see their basic core personality traits, because this could be a very controlling person, obsessive, and it could be a literal Scorpio, because Pluto rules Scorpio. And not to say that all Scorpios would be like this, but you and Scorpio have a strong attraction for one another. So it's not beyond the pale that you might meet and be attracted to a Scorpio person. But you don't want somebody who begins to control you. Maybe at first they're charming, but little by little they trap you in their web. On the positive side, this could be the person who transforms your life. That, you measure life as before and after you met that person. That's how much of an influence that they have. And I would dare say a spiritual influence, a psychological influence, that they might call you on your bullshit, your Leo bullshit. And that could be something that you need, rather than a weak partner who is just like going to agree with everything that you say. Because sometimes Leos get into those types of relationships, and eventually I think most of you will find that you don't respect that other person, because you're really looking for somebody who is a match for you. And for Leo, that is a very strong-willed, or when I say strong-willed, a person who knows themselves and isn't looking to follow you, but is going to sometimes challenge you to be the best person you can be, rather than worship you. Because sometimes when Leos are imbalanced, they think that's what they want, is somebody who's going to worship them or whatever. So this could be a very profound, I think that's what I'd say about Pluto, type of individual and relationship. So, and it can be very healing for you, this person, where they, maybe you feel you can trust them and you bare your soul to them, where it's a very deep relationship. It's not shallow and things like that. So, that's what I have for you. And like I said, Pluto is going to go back into Capricorn. So it will, I think most of you, this is going to be more of a 2024 thing where you're going to see it, or even beyond that. But it's always good to know what's coming down the pike. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.